Welcome to my YouTube channel, The Story Verse Legends. On my channel, the video I upload doesn't contain any AI content, any robotics or any fake voices. So, without any wasting of time, let's go to the video.
Wind came first. It rolled low across the plains, dragging a curtain of dust behind it, whispering through dry grass and rattling loose boards on forgotten fences. Folks around Red Hollow said the wind never stopped. It just rested now and then. Caleb Turner figured they were right. He rode into town with that same wind at his back. His coat was worn thin at the edges, boots scuffed from miles that didn't need counting, and his hat pulled low enough to shadow his eyes. The horse beneath him, a tired bay mare named Daisy, moved steady but slow, each step careful on the hard-packed ground. They'd both seen better days, but neither one complained. Red Hollow didn't look like much. A handful of buildings leaned into the street like they were too tired to stand straight. The saloon doors creaked even without a breeze, and the general store had windows clouded with dust so thick it looked like no one had cleaned them in years. A water trough sat near the center of town, half full and ringed with cracked mud. Caleb guided Daisy toward it without a word. A couple of men standing outside the saloon watched him. They didn't speak, didn't nod, just stared the way people do when they're trying to decide whether you're trouble or just passing through. Caleb didn't give them much to go on. He swung down from the saddle, boots hitting the dirt with a dull thud, and led Daisy to the trough. "Easy, girl," he muttered as she lowered her head to drink. The water rippled, catching bits of sunlight through the dust-heavy air. Caleb rested a hand on her neck, his eyes moving across the street without turning his head. Old habit. The kind that sticks when a man's spent too long on his own. He noticed things. The way the blacksmith's forge was cold. The way a wagon sat abandoned near the edge of town, one wheel missing. The way folks kept their voices low, like something might be listening. Red Hollow wasn't just tired, it was holding its breath. A voice broke through his thoughts. "You ain't from around here." Caleb turned slightly. A woman stood a few steps behind him, holding a bucket in one hand. She looked strong, the kind of person who'd had to be. Her blonde hair was pulled back tight, and her eyes were sharp enough to cut through most men's excuses. "No," Caleb said simply. She studied him for a moment longer, then glanced at Daisy. "Horse looks like she's earned a rest." "She has." The woman nodded once, like that told her all she needed to know. "Name's Emily Carter." "Caleb Turner." She shifted the bucket to her other hand. "You planning to stay, Caleb Turner?" Caleb looked past her, out toward the open land stretching beyond the town. The plains rolled on forever, broken only by a distant ridge that caught the light just right. "Just passing through," he said. Emily didn't seem convinced, but she didn't press. Instead, she lowered her voice slightly. "If you're smart, you won't linger too long." Caleb raised an eyebrow. "That's so." "There's things moving around here," she said. "Things folks don't talk about out loud." Before he could ask more, she turned and walked off, boots crunching softly against the dirt. Caleb watched her go, then glanced back toward the ridge. That's when he saw it. A shape against the horizon. Dark. Still. A horse. Even from that distance, there was something different about it. It stood taller, prouder, like it didn't belong to the land so much as it ruled it. Daisy shifted beside him, letting out a quiet snort. Caleb narrowed his eyes, watching the figure on the ridge. The wind picked up again, carrying dust across the plains, and for just a moment, it felt like the whole world had gone quiet. Then the horse turned and vanished beyond the rise. Caleb didn't move. But something had already settled in his mind, and he knew, without quite knowing why, that he wasn't leaving Red Hollow just yet. Caleb couldn't shake the image of the horse on the ridge. All through the evening, it stayed with him, dark against the pale sky, still as stone, watching the land like it owned every inch of it. He'd seen horses all his life, worked them, traded them, buried a few, but that one was different. He found himself heading out at first light. The town was quiet, the kind of quiet that settles heavy before the day begins. Daisy moved steady beneath him, her ears flicking at the sound of wind brushing through the dry grass. Caleb rode past the last crooked fence of Red Hollow and out into the open, toward the distant ridge. The land stretched wide and empty, but it wasn't lifeless. Tracks marked the dirt, coyote, jackrabbit, and something else. Hoofprints, fresh ones. Caleb slowed Daisy, letting her pick her way forward while he studied the ground. The prints were deeper than most, spaced farther apart. Whoever or whatever made them had strength behind every step. Easy, he murmured, more to himself than the horse. By the time the sun crested the horizon, he reached the ridge. He dismounted and led Daisy the rest of the way, boots crunching softly against loose stone. The wind was stronger up here, tugging at his coat, carrying the dry scent of dust and sagebrush. And then he saw it again. The stallion stood just beyond the ridge, its back to him this time, head lifted toward the rising sun. Its coat was black, true black, not the faded kind most horses carried after years in the sun. Its mane moved like smoke in the wind, and every line of its body spoke of power held in check. Caleb stopped. He didn't call out, didn't move any closer. He just watched. The stallion's ears flicked. It knew he was there. Slowly it turned its head, dark eyes locking onto him. For a long moment, neither of them moved. Daisy shifted behind Caleb, uneasy. He rested a hand on her neck, steadying her. "It's all right," he said quietly. The stallion took one step forward, then another. Not toward Caleb, just shifting its weight, testing the ground like it was deciding something. Caleb kept his hands loose at his sides, no rope, no sudden moves. "I ain't here to take you," he said, his voice low and even. The horse snorted, sharp and warning. Its muscles tightened, ready to bolt. But it didn't. Instead, it stood its ground. That was all Caleb needed. He stayed a while longer, not pushing, not trying to close the distance, just sharing the space. The wind moved between them, carrying dust and silence. Eventually, he stepped back. "See you around," he muttered. He turned, mounted Daisy, and rode off without looking back. He returned the next day, and the next. Each time, the stallion was there, or close enough, watching from a distance, waiting. Caleb brought water once, leaving a small bucket near a rock before stepping away. The horse didn't touch it while he was there, but when Caleb came back the following morning, it was empty. That made him smile. By the fourth day, the distance between them had closed some, not much, but enough. Caleb could see the fine scars along the stallion's flank now. Old marks. Proof it had crossed paths with men before, and hadn't come out trusting. Figured as much, Caleb said under his breath. On the fifth day, he took a step closer than before. The stallion's head shot up, ears pinned back. It pawed the ground, kicking up dust, ready to run. Caleb stopped immediately, raising one hand slightly. Not reaching, just there. "Easy," he said. The wind died down for a moment, like the land itself was listening. "Easy now. I ain't here to break you." The stallion's breathing slowed, just a fraction. Its ears shifted forward again, uncertain. It didn't come to him, but it didn't leave either. And in that stillness, with dust hanging in the air and the sun climbing higher, something changed. Not trust, not yet, but the beginning of it. Caleb lowered his hand and took a slow step back, giving the horse its space. "That's enough for today," he said softly. As he rode away, he didn't need to look back to know the stallion was still there, watching him. Waiting. Just like he was. By the sixth morning, Caleb knew the stallion's habits better than most men knew their own. It kept to the ridge at sunrise, moved down toward the dry creek bed by midday, and disappeared into the broken canyon by nightfall. It was careful, smart, the kind of animal that had learned the hard way not to trust anything that walked on two legs. Caleb respected that. He was halfway up the ridge when Daisy's ears twitched sharply. She lifted her head, nostrils flaring. Caleb felt it too. Something wasn't right. The air carried more than dust that morning. It carried sound. Faint, but there. Metal clinking. Voices. Too many voices. He slid down from the saddle and crouched low, leading Daisy behind a cluster of rocks. From there, he eased forward just enough to see over the ridge. Men. 5 of them. They rode hard and careless, spreading out across the open land like they already owned it. Their horses were strong but restless, picking up on the tension in their riders. Ropes hung from their saddles, rifles rested easy in their hands. Caleb's jaw tightened. "Damn fools," he muttered under his breath. They weren't just passing through. They were hunting. The stallion stood farther out, near the edge of the ridge, unaware, or maybe unwilling to move. It held its ground like it always did, proud and unbroken. One of the men laughed, loud and sharp. "There he is! Told you he was real!" Another swung his rope loose. "Boss is gonna pay good for that one!" Boss. Caleb didn't need to guess who they meant. Victor Hale. The name had been floating around Red Hollow since Caleb arrived. A land baron with deep pockets and a mean streak to match. He'd been buying up everything he could, pushing folks out when they wouldn't sell. If he wanted that stallion, it wasn't for admiration. It was for control. Caleb watched as the men closed in. The stallion's head snapped up, ears flattening. It turned, ready to bolt, but they'd already spread too wide. One rider pushed from the left, another from the right, driving it toward the narrow stretch of land near the canyon edge. "Smart," Caleb muttered, though there was no respect in it. They'd done this before. The stallion ran. It moved like lightning, hooves tearing through the dirt, mane whipping behind it. But the ground betrayed it. The ridge narrowed, the drop to the canyon cutting off escape on one side. A rope flew, missed, another followed. This one caught. The loop tightened around the stallion's neck, jerking it hard to the side. The horse reared, striking out, wild and furious, but the men held fast. Another rope snagged its hind leg, pulling it off balance. Dust exploded into the air. The stallion fought like something possessed, muscles straining, eyes blazing with rage. It nearly broke free. Caleb saw it, saw the moment it almost snapped the rope, but the men were ready. They pulled together, dragging it down inch by inch. "Hold him!" one shouted. "I got him!" Caleb's hands curled into fists. Every instinct told him to move, to step out, to stop it. But 5 armed men against 1 rider and a tired mare wasn't a fight. It was a death sentence. So he stayed where he was and watched. The stallion finally hit the ground, sides heaving, still fighting even as they tied it down. One of the men laughed again, breathless this time. "Mean son of a gun, ain't he?" "Won't be for long," another replied. "Hale'll break him." Caleb's eyes hardened. "No," he said quietly, though no one heard him. They hauled the stallion to its feet, ropes tight, control forced where none belonged. The horse stumbled once, then stood rigid, refusing to give more than it had to. Even now, it didn't submit. They turned back toward the canyon, dragging the stallion with them. Caleb stayed still until they were gone, until the dust settled and the land fell quiet again. Only then did he stand. Daisy shifted behind him, uneasy. Caleb rested a hand on her neck, his gaze fixed on the trail they'd left behind. "Well," he said slowly, voice low and steady. "Guess I ain't just passing through after all." He swung into the saddle in one smooth motion, and without another word, he turned Daisy toward the canyon and rode after them.
The canyon swallowed sound. By the time Caleb reached its edge, the wind had died down, leaving the air thick and still. The trail ahead twisted between high rock walls, narrow enough in places to scrape a rider's boot if he wasn't careful. Shadows stretched long across the ground, even with the sun still hanging high. Caleb slowed Daisy to a cautious walk. "They came through here," he murmured. The signs were clear, fresh hoofprints pressed deep into the dirt, scuffed rock where a horse had fought against its lead, and drag marks where the stallion had been forced forward. It hadn't gone easy, that much was certain. Caleb followed the trail deeper. The canyon floor dipped and curved, forcing him to take it slow. Loose stones shifted under Daisy's hooves, and more than once she hesitated, ears flicking nervously at the tight space around them. "Steady," Caleb said, keeping his voice low. The deeper they went, the darker it felt. Not just from the lack of sunlight, but from something else, a tension in the air that set his nerves on edge. This was the kind of place where men did things they didn't want seen or heard. After nearly an hour, Caleb caught it. Smoke. Faint at first, then stronger as he rounded a bend. He reined Daisy to a stop and slid down from the saddle, tying her loosely to a jut of rock. "Stay put," he whispered. She huffed softly, but didn't argue. Caleb moved forward on foot, keeping close to the canyon wall. Each step was careful, placed with the kind of precision that came from years of staying alive in places like this. He kept one hand near his revolver, the other brushing lightly against the rock for balance. Voices drifted through the air. "Told you he'd fetch a price. Meanest horse I ever seen." Caleb crouched behind a cluster of boulders and looked out. The camp sat in a small clearing where the canyon widened just enough to hold it. A fire burned low at the center, a pot hanging over it. Bedrolls were scattered around, and 5 horses were tied near the far wall. And there, just beyond them, the stallion. It was tied to a thick post driven into the ground, ropes still wrapped tight around its neck and hind leg. Its sides rose and fell hard with each breath, dark coat streaked with dust and sweat, but its eyes, those hadn't changed, still sharp, still wild. One of the men stepped close, holding a canteen. "Might as well get used to it," he said, splashing water toward the horse's muzzle. The stallion jerked back, nearly pulling the post loose. The man cursed and stepped away. "Leave it," another called from the fire. "Hale wants him strong. We break him tomorrow." Tomorrow. Caleb's jaw tightened. He counted them again, 5 men. It's near the fire, one tending the horses, one sitting off to the side cleaning his rifle, and the last pacing near the stallion, like he didn't trust it not to snap free. 5 men, all armed. Caleb leaned back against the rock, thinking. Charging in head first wasn't an option. Not here, not like this. He needed time. He needed quiet. And he needed them asleep. The sun dipped lower, and shadows crept across the canyon floor. The men settled in as the light faded, their voices growing quieter, movement slower. One by one they drifted toward their bedrolls, leaving only a single guard by the fire. Caleb waited. The stars crept into the narrow strip of sky above, faint but steady. The canyon grew colder, the silence deeper. Still Caleb didn't move. Not until the guard's head dipped once, then again, and finally stayed down. Only then did Caleb step out from the shadows. He moved like a ghost across the dirt, each step measured, each breath controlled. The fire crackled softly, masking the faint sound of his boots. The stallion saw him first. Its ears flicked forward, body tensing, but it didn't make a sound. Caleb stopped a few feet away, meeting its gaze. "Easy," he whispered. The horse's breathing slowed just a little. Caleb reached for the rope. Behind him, one of the men shifted in his sleep. Caleb froze. Silence returned. Slowly, carefully, he pulled his knife free and began to cut. The rope strained, fibers snapping one by one. "Almost there," he murmured. The stallion shifted, muscles coiling with anticipation. And then the rope gave. The horse reared, breaking free with a sudden burst of power that shattered the quiet. A man shouted. Another scrambled to his feet. Caleb didn't hesitate. "Go," he snapped, stepping back. But the stallion didn't run. Not yet. It stood there, wild and breathing hard, eyes locked on Caleb as chaos erupted around them. And in that single heartbeat, Caleb realized this wasn't just a rescue anymore. This was something else entirely.
Chaos broke loose like a gunshot. "Hey, he's loose!" one of the men shouted, scrambling to his feet. Another grabbed for his rifle, knocking over a tin cup that clattered loudly against the rocks. The quiet of the canyon shattered in an instant, boots pounding, voices rising, firelight dancing wildly against the stone walls. Caleb didn't wait. He stepped forward, grabbing the last length of rope hanging from the stallion's neck, steadying himself as the horse reared high, front hooves striking at the air. "Easy!" Caleb hissed, though there was nothing easy about the moment. The stallion's muscles bunched beneath its dark coat, ready to bolt or fight, or both. Its eyes burned with fear and fury, but there was something else there too. Recognition. Caleb met its gaze, holding it for just a second longer than most men would dare. Then he made his choice. In one smooth motion, he swung himself onto the horse's back. The stallion exploded forward. Gunfire cracked behind them. A bullet struck the ground near Caleb's leg, spraying dirt. Another whistled past his shoulder. He leaned low over the horse's neck, gripping tight as they surged through the camp, scattering bedrolls and kicking sparks from the dying fire. "Stop him!" someone yelled, but no one could. The stallion tore into the canyon, faster than anything Caleb had ever ridden. It didn't just run, it flew, hooves striking stone with a rhythm that echoed like thunder through the narrow walls. Caleb held on. He didn't try to steer, didn't pull the rope. He let the horse choose the path, trusting its instinct over his own. Behind them, the men gave chase. Their horses struggled in the tight canyon, slipping on loose rock, unable to match the stallion's speed or certainty. Shouts and gunfire followed, but they grew fainter with every passing second. The stallion veered sharply around a bend, then another, moving through the canyon like it had memorized every turn. Caleb felt it, the confidence, the control. This was its ground. "All right," Caleb muttered under his breath, a grim smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. "You lead." They burst through a narrow gap in the rock, emerging into a wider stretch of canyon where the moonlight spilled down in silver beams. The sudden openness gave the stallion room to stretch out, and it did, surging forward with even greater speed. But the chase wasn't over. Two riders broke through the gap behind them, closer than Caleb liked. "Damn it!" he muttered, glancing back. The stallion sensed it too. Its ears flicked, its stride shifting slightly, not slowing but adjusting. Ahead the canyon split. One path led left, wide but exposed. The other, right, narrowed sharply, twisting between jagged rock formations. Caleb didn't have time to think. The stallion chose. It veered right. The path tightened almost immediately, forcing Caleb to duck low as rock walls closed in on either side. Sparks flew as hooves struck stone, the sound deafening in the confined space. Behind them, one of the riders tried to follow. A sharp crack echoed through the canyon. Horse or bone, Caleb couldn't tell. A shout followed, then silence. Only one rider remained. He pushed harder, reckless now, firing wildly into the dark. A bullet grazed Caleb's sleeve, tearing cloth but missing flesh. He gritted his teeth, holding tight as the stallion surged forward again. The path twisted one final time, and then it opened. They burst out onto the open plains, the night sky stretching wide above them. The wind hit hard, carrying dust and freedom in equal measure. The stallion didn't slow. It ran like it had something to prove, not to Caleb, not to the men behind them, but to the world itself. Caleb finally risked a glance back. The last rider had stopped at the canyon's edge, unwilling to follow into the open where there was no cover, no advantage. They'd made it, for now. Caleb let out a slow breath, his grip easing just slightly as the stallion continued its relentless run across the plains. He didn't try to stop it, didn't try to claim it. He just rode. Because in that moment, under the vast western sky with dust rising behind them and hooves pounding like thunder beneath him, Caleb understood something clear as day. This horse wasn't his, and it never would be. But for now, they were riding together. By the time the first light of dawn touched the plains, the stallion had slowed. Its powerful strides eased into a steady gallop, then a canter, and finally a walk. Steam rose faintly from its dark coat in the cool morning air. Caleb slid down from its back, boots hitting the ground as the world seemed to quiet around them. For a moment, neither of them moved. The land stretched wide and endless in every direction, painted in soft gold by the rising sun. The wind returned, gentle this time, carrying the scent of dust and dry grass across the open range. Caleb rested a hand on the stallion's neck. The horse tensed at first, muscles tightening beneath his palm. But it didn't pull away. "That's far enough," Caleb said quietly. The stallion's breathing slowed, its ears flicking back and forth, alert but no longer frantic. Up close, Caleb could see the marks left by the ropes, raw lines pressed into its coat, reminders of the fight it had endured. He reached up and carefully loosened what remained of the rope around its neck, pulling it free. "There you go," he murmured. The stallion stepped back once the rope was gone, shaking its head, mane tossing in the morning light. It looked at Caleb then. Not with fear, not with anger, but with something harder to name. Understanding, maybe. Or the beginning of it. Caleb let his hand fall to his side. He knew better than to reach again. Off in the distance, a faint shape moved along the horizon. Daisy. She came at a steady pace, reins trailing loosely, having followed the trail through the canyon on her own. Caleb let out a quiet breath of relief as she approached, her tired but faithful steps bringing her back to him. "Well, look at that," he said softly. "Knew you'd find your way." Daisy nickered low as she reached him, nudging his shoulder like she had something to say about being left behind. Caleb gave her neck a gentle pat, then glanced back at the stallion. The horse hadn't left. It stood a short distance away, watching him the same way it had on that first morning. Still, proud, and free. Caleb took a slow step back toward Daisy, then another. He moved without hurry, giving the stallion space the same way he had from the start. "You don't belong to me," he said, his voice low but steady. "Never did." The wind picked up slightly, rustling through the grass between them. "For what it's worth, I'm glad I found you." The stallion's ears flicked forward. For a heartbeat, Caleb thought it might turn and run like it had before, but it didn't. Instead, it stepped forward, just once, closing the distance enough that Caleb could see the quiet strength in its eyes, the wildness still there, untouched and unbroken. Then, just as quickly, it turned. With a powerful push, it broke into a run. Dust kicked up behind it as it stretched into a full gallop, cutting across the open plains like a shadow in motion. Its mane streamed behind it, catching the sunlight as it moved farther and farther away. Caleb watched in silence. He didn't call after it, didn't try to follow. He just stood there, hat low against the wind, until the stallion became nothing more than a distant shape on the horizon, and then nothing at all. A long moment passed before Caleb turned back to Daisy. "Well," he said, adjusting the saddle with practiced hands, "reckon that's that." He mounted up slowly, settling into the familiar weight of the saddle. Daisy shifted beneath him, ready to move, waiting for direction. Caleb looked once more toward the open land. Red Hollow lay somewhere behind him. The trouble with Victor Hale wouldn't be forgotten, but for now, it was finished. The town would have its chance to breathe again. As for Caleb, he had no reason to stay. He nudged Daisy forward. They rode out across the plains, the rising sun at their backs and the wind at their side. Dust lifted beneath Daisy's hooves, trailing behind them in a soft cloud that slowly faded into the distance. Another rider on the open range, another story carried off by the wind. But somewhere out there, far beyond sight, hooves still thundered across the land, free, untamed, and exactly where they belong.
Welcome back, friends. I hope you watched the whole video and enjoyed a lot. Please show your love and support. For more videos, like, share, comment, subscribe and hit the bell icon button. Thank you.